Church of Hope, can you please help me welcome Amy Riddering this morning?
First, I just want to say thank you to you all. It is such an honor, really, for me. I'm blessed to have this partnership, this friendship with this church. You're a church who gets it. You're investing outside the walls, and it's just, I don't know, it's awesome to see and awesome to be a part of.
Well, we're excited that you're here today, and we get to hear your story. And we so appreciate you taking the time to unpack your journey. The last several years have not been easy. And this morning, we're going to walk through some really hard stuff. So that doesn't go lightly on me or on us. And so we just appreciate you being here. So let's rewind a little bit. We just saw this incredible thing that you're doing in Burkina Faso. And how did you land there? It's 2011, a couple years ago. You and Mike and your girls live in South Florida, have a successful career. The girls are in school, have friends. I mean, you've built a life. Mike comes home and he starts talking to you. Amy, we need to go to Burkina Faso. What's going through your mind in all of this?
Okay, so we'll even just rewind a little bit before that, because back in 2008, when economy was really bad, and my husband had his boat business, nobody wanted to spend money on their boats. Nobody cared about repairing their boats. So things started to get hard for us as a family. But that's where really I think our faith journey was tested and really began, because we had to know that and completely rely that God was going to take care of it all. And so as time went on and my husband had to downsize and basically started just working out of the house, and my company, I went down to 5 days a week. But we became more and more invested in our church. We became more invested in the youth, my husband being youth pastor, myself a youth leader, doing much with that. And during all this time, people knew we were struggling, and they would often say, hey, Mike, what are you guys going to do? And he would say, you know what? If God has us drilling wells in Africa, that's where we'll go. And he didn't mean it. He didn't mean it. He said that out of just saying, God, that's where my heart is. My heart is whatever you have for us to do, that's what we're going to do. And I was okay when he said it once or twice, but over time he continued to say it over and over, to where I stopped and I was like, just so you know, we're not moving to Africa. Like, you say this a lot, and like, we have our family here, my parents, our kids are in great school. Like, we're really happy here. We're invested in our church. Like, you keep saying this, but yeah. And so, again, over time, I believe that what happened is God did this like heart surgery on me, to where I really came to a point where I said, if I could live out that biblical principle, that to drop everything behind and just follow wherever Christ would take me, I want to be able to, Christ died for me. He gave his life for me. So I want to give the rest of my life for him. And it wasn't but the next time that Mike said, hey, when someone asked, if God has us digging wells in Africa, that's where we'll go. And I said, you know what, you're right. If he has us drilling wells in Africa, that's where we'll go. And it wasn't but a couple days later that his brother called and said, hey, I'm taking a trip to Africa. Do you want to go? And he had been doing that for probably 12 years, but we never really thought about it. We didn't know Burkina Faso. We never heard of Burkina Faso. He just said, hey, I'm taking a trip to Africa. And I just felt like, okay, so this has been kind of an ongoing thing, a statement that's been made. I really feel like you need to go. And I really felt God was saying he needed to go, and he needed to go with my daughter, Delaney, who was like 13 at the time, and I could just rest back and see what God was going to do. And so they did go with the thought that, will God clearly speak to me? Is there something really about this Africa thing? And while he was there, he saw the need. You can't go there and not see the need. You can see, and even in the video, you see what it's like. So he saw a lot of need, but he didn't want it to be about what he wanted to do for God. He wanted to be what God clearly said, I want you to do for me. So towards the end of the trip, it was like a 17-day trip, he was sitting down at the table with a missionary that was there on the ground, who started to unpack what she had been praying for, and how she felt led to move somewhere, and how she felt like she had been praying for 2 years for a family to come and to take over this orphanage. And he's thinking, wow, this is like so much more than I could even imagine. And he's getting excited, but he's saying, oh, but calm down, because I really want this to be a clear, message from God. And he told the missionary, well, we'll pray about it. I'll talk to Amy, we'll pray. And then when they were parting ways to go to sleep, she turned around and said, hey, you know what? I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but we've got like $40,000 set aside for drilling wells. And that was the moment, like the lightning bolt. And so when he came home, we talked about it, and I just felt super clear that if God was that clear with him, I'm on board. He's that clear with me. This is it, or this is our call. And the research began on everything. And there's a little more to the story because our daughter had one of those, I can't do this, like I can't leave my friends moment, to then a coming to say, hey, I can't explain it, but we're supposed to be there. And so that was like January of 2011, and in December of 2011, we packed 2 suitcases apiece and got on a plane, and that was the first time my feet hit African soil.
Wow, that's quite a journey.
Yeah.
And so you move there, you are living, you're working.
Yeah.
I mean, you, Mike, and Delaney was living with you there at the time.
Yes.
Haley, your other daughter, was still in the States.
Yes.
And so you are investing your lives, you are listening, you're obeying God. Mm-hmm. And then in 2016, last year, everything changes.
Yeah. Tonight we are learning more about the victims and survivors of a terror attack in West Africa.
What do you fear? I mean, what are you scared of? Everyone seems to be scared of something. What are you scared of? Because that fear is affecting your life.
Mike Riddering moved with Amy and their 2 daughters to Burkina Faso in 2011 to start an orphanage.
That fear may be keeping you from coming and seeing us in Africa.
Mike and a pastor were at the cafe in the country's capital, Ouagadougou, to meet new volunteers. The pastor later called Amy after escaping. Gunmen came into the restaurant shooting, and everyone ran to hide. The pastor somehow had Mike's phone and called, wrote Amy. It was still unclear if Mike survived.
God is doing some fantastic things with us because we were able to move beyond the fear. If we lost everything, even our own lives, we've gained everything in heaven. This is something to look forward to. Can you live your life like that? Philippians 1:21 says, For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. I now get that. I now understand that. And I embrace that. I love that. How cool is our God if He can give us this, that if we die, this is gain. What else do I have to be afraid of?
In 2016, just a couple years after being in Burkina Faso, you'd listened to God's call. You went there with Mike. And then you got the phone call that you never dreamed of getting. And this is what you posted on Facebook. So we're all watching on the news. We see you post this. Heaven has gained a warrior. I know God has a purpose in all things, but sometimes it is a complete mystery to me. My best friend, partner in crime, and love of my life. The best husband ever. An amazing father to his children, and a papa to everyone. My heart is so heavy, and I'm having trouble believing he is gone. Mike was an example in the way he lived and loved. God be glorified. Mike Riddering, I will love you always. You left quite a legacy here. I can only imagine the adventures you're having now. So we see this. What's going on in Amy? How are you trusting God? How are you finding the joy we read about earlier this morning in the unthinkable when terrorism is hitting you and your family? You're obeying God. What's happening in you?
Well, first, so that was like the darkest 20-some hours of my life. Just really not knowing what was going on and just completely being thrown off guard, like never expecting anything like that, like ever. So when I got the call, I had probably like a 5-minute conversation with myself, and it kind of went like this. It was, what am I going to do? How can I possibly do this without him to of course I'm going to do it. And God, I can't do this alone, so I'm really going to need you. And I waited before I posted this because I had my daughters didn't know. So I waited for my brother-in-law and sister-in-law to let them know because I couldn't do it. And then after they knew, that was just raw from my heart. That's what I posted.
Wow. Watching how you've journeyed through trusting God, it is inspiring and it's challenging because you have this 5-minute conversation with yourself and you leave that conversation going, this is what God called Mike and I to, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And you celebrated Mike's life in Burkina Faso. You come back to the States. You celebrate him here in South Florida. Mm-hmm. And I know many people were asking you this question. And I even myself, last summer, you were here. Mm-hmm. We were at the house. The kids were swimming. And we all looked at you and said, Amy, what's next? Right. And in the midst of tragedy, people wanted to know, are you going to go back?
Right.
And your answer to me last year, that has stayed with me. Walk us through why you decided to go back to Burkina Faso.
Okay. Well, first, you got to understand that I didn't go to Burkina Faso just to support my husband's work as a missionary. We were partners together, so we were both called to this work. And once I landed in Burkina, going was an act of submission, but landing there was like it's embedded in my heart. And this is where our work is. And for Mike and the things that we were doing together, I couldn't imagine not following through, because being there and doing these things, he's there. He's a part of everything that's going on. And I can, as we complete things and move forward with things, I can't help but think how cool he would think this was, And
That's incredible. And I remember you saying that at our kitchen table. You could feel Mike there, and he still is very much there. So go back. What is life in Burkina Faso like now for you and your team?
Okay, so God has been very faithful and has sent amazing people to kind of walk alongside of me, even if it's just for temporary time. So I had an amazing team this year of nationals and internationals that work together. And so one of the things that, Mike and I had always wanted to do is really to empower and train local people to run the ministries. So as we continue to do that, then we're continued to expand upon other ministries. So I've had many people in helping to train people to take over, like our women's center, and we have a local woman who now is the director, but I had a girl this year helping alongside of me. It's been a challenging year because I had to kind of find what my role is, because we were a team. And so half that team being gone, it was like half myself being gone. And so trying to figure out, okay, well, now I have to take on that role also that Mike had, not only, in doing the missionary work and with our employees and that, but also as the sole parent to my kids. And so, it was very, very challenging, but God's walked with me through it. He's held my hand. He's carried me when necessary. He's pushed me when necessary. So I couldn't do it without God. I couldn't do it without prayer.
Wow. And you've even adopted 2 new kids. These are your precious kids, Biba, Moisey.
Yeah. So I have 2 biological daughters, and one of them is here in the lobby, and the 2 kids are in the lobby as well, so you'll get to meet them. But so my husband and I, it was on our heart. It was 3 years ago, 3 summers ago, that they actually came and moved into our home. They were from the orphanage, but they were children that did not have an exit strategy. There was no chance for adoption for them, and there was no chance to reconcile with their families. And so they just had our hearts, and we took them in. And we actually, they're not officially adopted yet, so we had got parental guardianship, so we're like legal guardians. Well, actually, it was in Mike's name, so after he died, I had to really scramble to get the paperwork changed over into my name. Even Biba's birth father is in another country, and so it was really, really difficult, and it happened very quickly, and the good news is that it happened, and so God was covering that. So now they are in my name, and now I'm trying to pursue dual citizenship so that I can adopt them as a national, because that's going to be the easiest way. I'm pursuing it. I'm just going forward. My paperwork is with them right now. I'm hoping when I get back that's done, and then I'll just continue on with the process until I can get these kids, legally mine. So.
That's incredible. Recently you and I had an awesome Facebook phone call conversation.
Oh, yeah.
First time I've done that. And you talked me through some of the things that were happening
Yeah.
that you and your team are pursuing in Burkina Faso right now. What are some of those things?
Okay, so the really cool thing is that, Mike was a visionary, but who is our biggest visionary? God. And he's the one that supplied the vision. And it was really cool for me to see how God has been supplying me vision. And so moving forward, like we've talked about for our Women's Crisis Center, we've talked about having a restaurant where the women can learn how to run a restaurant business and learn clean hygiene practices and things like that. But we also have 3 other projects that are in the works, and one is to add a preschool to our existing school to give kids a foundation and a good start. In Burkina, for our private school, we still have to use Burkina curriculum. However, we can implement the Bible into that curriculum, but for preschool, it can be a total Christian curriculum. So we're really excited about kids having that possibility and getting started earlier. Then we also want to start a ministry center, and the ministry center would be one thing that pastors have talked to us about is that they receive training, but they don't really then afterwards receive further trainings and refreshing. And so we want a ministry center where pastors can come together and they can learn more, and they can have conferences, and then we can train teams of evangelists. We can train national missionaries up to go out and spread the love of Jesus.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love everything that you guys are working on right now. And, many of us are listening to your story. We're asking the questions that Mark told us to ask while we heard your story.
Yeah.
And we're starting to tip in, okay, this is becoming our story.
Yeah.
How can someone here invest their life with what you're doing in Burkina Faso?
Okay. Well, so a couple different ways, of course. Pray or continue to pray, because we cannot do it. Prayer is the glue. Second, you can come and visit. You can, a team, an individual, a couple of people, a family. We have visitors throughout the year. There's nothing that you can't look at it and say, how could I fit in and what could I do? You've all been trained in some way without knowing it to do something. And we have, we've got our women's center. We go and deliver grain to widows and pray with them. We have our children at the orphanage. We do Tom's Shoes. We have our agriculture project. So there's so many different ways. When I went to Burkina, it wasn't under any assumption that I didn't know that I would be equipped or prepared. I knew one thing. I could go and I could love people. I could be the hands, feet, and heart of Christ. And if that was all I did, that was going to be okay. Yeah, so I just want to say that God is glorified when he uses you most in your inabilities, not in your abilities. So never think, I can't do this, or let me pray about that because I don't know if that's really what God's calling me. Take a step of faith.
Oh, that's so good. And we can even visit you in the lobby this morning.
Yes, you can visit in the lobby. Our Women's Crisis Center, all the products that you see out there are made by our women in the center. In the 9-month program, the women learn skills. These are women who've been abandoned, abused, widowed young, and so they've learned how to care for themselves and their families. And so 100% of the sales goes back into the program. We also have child sponsorship. So you'll see packets out there, much like a Compassion International type of program. These are all kids, though, that I personally know. They're in our school and in our surrounding areas. And for $35 a month, these children will receive their education, they'll receive help with food, they'll receive medical care, uniforms, school supplies, and then we mentor these kids and help them up. So we don't want to just educate them, we want them to have like a life plan. And first and foremost, of course, we want them to know the hope they have in Jesus Christ.
That's incredible. Yeah. One of the things that I really do love about your story, and we chatted about this morning, is that one of the key parts of our discipleship process at Church of Hope is to trust God first for salvation, and then in every situation. And trusting God for salvation, we understand that. We gather here, we make that decision to follow Jesus. But trusting God in every situation, that's a whole other scenario. Especially trusting God when life does not unpack how you thought. And you walked us through that today, how you were able to find joy, how you were able to trust God when life does not unpack how you thought, when the unthinkable happens. But because you are called to something, you are continuing to invest your life for God's glory. And you might not have the answers, But watching Mike's story continue to hit people globally, I mean, every news outlet has picked up his story. So his life's legacy is continuing to partner with people to discover in Christ we have hope. And then how you are leaning in and trusting God is doing the same. So thank you for sharing your story, for unpacking who you are, who you're becoming, and encouraging us to get in the game and invest our lives as well. So Amy, I'm going to pray for you, and then we'll discover our next steps.
Okay.
God, we love you. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for Amy. Thank you for how she is trusting you in the midst of the unthinkable. How she's modeling for us what it means when circumstances and situations don't unpack how we thought, but that we can trust you. God, help us to trust you this week. Help us to get in the game and to invest our lives for your glory. And God, continue to put your hand of favor and blessing on Amy and Reach Burkina as we're partnering with people in Burkina Faso to discover in your Son, we have hope.